So you've heard of LLCs, sole proprietorships, and partnerships, but did you know there is another type of company structure that also has a lot of benefits? I'm talking about segregated accounts companies, also known as SACs. This is a brand new structure to Jamaica, and here to tell us all about how it works is acting CEO of JIFSA, Rickie Davis. So joining us for the discussion is acting CEO of JIFSA, Rickie Davis. Welcome back, Rickie.
Thank you, Kalila. Very happy to be back.
So the last time you were with us, you were telling us all about what JIFSA is and what you guys do. Today we're talking about one of the specific things that you do, which is Segregated Accounts Companies, SACs. So what is a SAC? What's that?
Well, a SAC is, as it says, a Segregated Accounts Company. For persons within the industry, they might know of them in other jurisdictions as things like segregated portfolio companies or segregated cell companies. In essence, what it is, it's you have one company, which we for now we'll call an umbrella company, and that company is able to have several accounts beneath that umbrella, with each account being able to hold separate assets. And in holding those separate assets, they're segregated from the others, and so the liabilities are segregated from the other segregated accounts.
I still don't feel like I understand. Break it down for me even further.
More. Okay, so you have a company, and the company, once you incorporate as a segregated accounts company, by the very nature of it being a segregated accounts company, you're allowed to have what are called segregated accounts beneath the company.
But what is a segregated account?
So the segregated account is an opportunity, or let's call it an account, but it's an opportunity to hold an asset within that segregated account, and it will be governed by a mandate and managed by a mandate. So let us say, for example, maybe an example would be best.
Yes, please.
So let us say that you're managing, I'll use the construction, for example. Let's say you have 5 projects going on simultaneously. In the past, what could happen is that you have one company, and that company is dealing with all 5. All the assets and liabilities are tied up together by the very nature of it. So what a segregated accounts company allows you to do, it now allows you to put each project within a segregated account to be managed separately from the others.
Okay.
And so if one kind of goes belly up, it doesn't affect the others. Whereas if they were, for lack of a better word, say commingled, then within a company structure, a normal or regular company structure, all of them would be affected by what happens with the other one.
No, so the example really did help.
Yes.
The example helped a lot. So how is it different from, we often hear such and such group of companies? Right.
So a group of companies is usually you have a company, and that company through various mechanisms will own other companies. So company A will be the shareholder of company B. Company B might be the shareholder of company C. And so it all flows up or down, whichever way you want to where there is a common ownership for that group of companies.
Okay, but segregated accounts company is one company.
One company.
Just with different portfolios, I guess,
correct,
under the company.
And it's a company with limited liability as well.
So each separate thing has its own limited liability? Each segregated account?
Yes, so you also have, there's another type of it within the legislation called an incorporated segregated accounts company. So that one allows each segregated account to be a legal person, to own assets in its own name, so to speak, so it can be sued and so on. So as you say, what it does, it allows each segregated account to operate independently of the others. And that is done through a mandate. So it's a written document, call it an agreement, a contract, as to how that segregated account will be managed, by whom, the powers, what they can do, with the assets or whatever it is.
Okay, so I'm thinking of how I could potentially apply this to my business. So I have Money Media, we have two divisions. We have news and we have education. And news is more or less what we're doing now. We create content around finance. And then the education side is books and courses. So I could technically segregate these two sides of the business.
Absolutely, absolutely. And although they may not use a segregated accounts model, you find that, like the NFL, for example, you have one company, NFL, so not-for-profit company, but it licenses everything else for everybody else to use. And so, technically, it's not a segregated account, but it's an example of some of the things that you can do with one company in respect of holding, assets and so on.
Okay, so how does this benefit the company or the people involved to segregate them in this way? Why is that necessary?
All right, so the benefit to having it is, as I mentioned before, it's a segregation of liabilities. That's a major effect of it. But it adds to transparency because you have a mandate, and the mandate determines who manages the segregated account, how it's supposed to be managed. When it comes time for accountability, that becomes an easier thing to do because there is a document that says you're responsible for this, or this person is responsible for this, to manage it in a certain way. And so it also makes it's transparent, it makes it easier. You know what your powers are, or what you can do, what you can't do, and that mandate will set it out effectively and properly. So everything goes towards ease, transparency, and it's just fit for purpose because it's not for everyone. Yeah.
It sounds like this would help to protect investor assets.
Absolutely, that is a major part of it. And of course, as you can imagine, transparency with investor assets is also important. And also, what is important too is that the segregated accounts company begins its life, so to speak, as a company registered under the Companies Act, which then brings into play all of the KYC, due diligence, and everything that needs to be done.
When you said it's not for everyone, who is it for?
Well, certainly, by implication, persons with multiple interests. So I'd given the example before of, say, construction projects. So let us even take, for example, someone who's managing assets, different classes of assets. So you could separate it by class. Maybe you could even separate it by client. So that you can, it ties it up in a very nice bow, so to speak. And by saying that it's not for everyone, I simply mean that to begin with, you kind of have to have, or would want to have, multiple things going on that you'd want to manage. And so if, for example, I was just making widgets, probably wouldn't be the best thing for me because I'm just making widgets. If, for example, I have multiple interests, trading in gold, making widgets, whatever the case may be, I can separate those so that they can be managed separately. And of course, in the course of all of that, you do your own accounts for it and so on and so forth.
Is it more expensive to have this type of structure?
In a way, yes, because now you're talking about having a manager for each, or it doesn't, and it can be, I won't presume to tell people how to do their business, but yes, certainly in terms of being able to manage all of those, the separate portfolios, it in essence would probably require more time. And also their filing requirements, annual filing requirements.
I was about to ask about that.
Well.
So do you have to file separately for each segregated account?
No, you file for the segregated accounts company, but within that filing, you will say I have 20 or 19 or whatever. And another good thing about it I can mention as well is that and this is a plus. So if you have, for example, an account that you decide to close during the course of the year for whatever, you go through the processes of having it closed. At that point, it's an accounting exercise. You have to ensure that internal accounting is dealt with. Whereas if you were using a separate company as a legal person for each asset, then what you'll effectively have is a winding up procedure at the company's office where it has to be, have to appoint a liquidator and deal with all of those things separately. And that is going to be a much more costly affair.
So you're still only filing one tax return, one annual return with company's office, or multiple?
One annual per segregated accounts company.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would list within it the details of the segregated accounts.
How does this structure reduce disputes?
Honestly speaking, disputes, I don't think you can reduce disputes because people can sue for sometimes frivolous reasons, sometimes people sue for strategic reasons. What it will do is that it will provide a way for more clarity for the resolution of those disputes. So the dispute is what it is. I may think that I have an issue, and at the end of the day it may not be such an issue, but it's a dispute nonetheless. But if you have a mandate that clearly states, yes, you can do this, then that is it, as opposed to leaving it to happenstance and to speculation, to circumstances and that sort of thing. So definitely. And of course, you know, when you're doing any kind of agreement, so to speak, you usually have a clause in there that speaks to dispute resolution, alternate dispute resolution and the like.
Okay. So apart from construction services, construction companies that you mentioned, possibly financial services, like who else might this structure benefit? Because it doesn't sound like it's something for SMEs.
No, not necessarily, because SMEs, no, as an SME or SMSE grows, then it may consider wanting to do that. So I don't want to call name of any company, but a lot of companies start small, and as they develop, they add, they diversify, they add different aspects to the company, money services, food, banking, although banks are exempt, are prohibited from being segregated accounts companies.
Oh, okay.
So,
but that sounds like a Grace Kennedy. So Grace Kennedy has remittance, money, banking, they have food, they have a lot of different things going on.
That's coincidental. But yes, so as I said, the point I was making is that as a company grows, as a company grows, or as a small business grows, and almost every single large business was once a small business in somebody's garage or something. And as you grow, then it can become unwieldy to have so many things going on at the same time, and then the implications, for example, of liability and how commingling assets and that sort of thing in one aspect may affect the other.
Okay.
It also gives a good idea to measure how the different portfolios or accounts are being managed or how they're being handled, and that can go a long way with your strategy. Mm-hmm. This account isn't doing so well. We can look at why isn't it doing so well, things like that.
So is this type of structure new to Jamaica?
Absolutely. What I had found previously is that persons were trying to put a square peg in a round hole, or a round peg in a square hole, whatever one it is, so to speak. They're trying to create this kind of, I wouldn't say entity, but in effect they're trying to behave in that way. But the truth is that effectively you can't do that, but now you have the legislation that allows you to do that, that allows you to segregate the accounts, that allows you to segregate
When
the
did that
liabilities.
come into effect, that legislation?
January 2025.
So it's brand new, about a year old.
Brand new.
And have you had companies use it yet?
We've had interest, and so that's the next phase that we're going into. And for the first, we will we'll be assisting persons who are interested in using it, because as I say, it's brand new, completely new, and it will, of a fact, involve Companies Office and the FSC.
So who do you go to first? Do you come to JIFSA first? Do you go to COJ first? How does that work if you want to do it?
Well, I would say come to JIFSA first, and then from there we'll go through the process with you.
And how does JIFSA help you to get that process started?
Well, of course, there are things that we'd want to know, what you plan to do, how you plan to do it, and so on. And then that would allow us to then seg into Companies Office and the FSC. And I keep mentioning the FSC because the FSC also plays an important role in that it's a default regulator for segregated accounts, meaning even if you're not engaged in regulated activity, the FSC would have that oversight of a segregated accounts company. So you may find that if you are engaged in regulated activity, then it will be up to the regulator, who the regulator will be in that case. But there will always be a regulator, and that to be what is the primary regulator, which is the FSC.
Well, thanks, Rickie. I learned something new today.
Well, you should try to learn new something every day.
Absolutely. Now we know all about segregated accounts companies. And of course, you can contact JIFSA for more information. All right, so that was a solid breakdown of segregated accounts companies, SACs, and why they matter. If you want a deeper dive into whether this structure could work for your business, you can visit JIFSA's website. The link is in the description below. In part 2 of this interview, we'll be talking about how you can set up a SAC, what the process entails, and you can learn a lot more about that. So of course, follow me for more conversations that connect you to real opportunities. Let's get this money.